Thank you very much for inviting us. Thank you, AIFA. This is Amit here. I manage the consumer fund at HDFC AMC. Listening to the 10th presentation of the day at 5:45 p.m. in the evening is probably not the ideal time to be a listener, and probably I wouldn't have kind of requested for this slot. But unfortunately, like other presenters, even I have some market gyan, which unfortunately you will have to listen for, kind of accommodate me for some point of time. But I promise one thing that, at the end of the presentation, I'll leave you with one idea, which is probably gonna be the idea for the next, 5 years or a decade. So with that note, I'll start my presentation. The initial part of the presentation has a few macro gyan, like other speakers, but we'll quickly shift to the consumption theme, which is the agenda of the presentation which I'm presenting today. So starting with, again, this is the GDP breakup, the real and the nominal part. Last 2 decades, we have been growing at 12%. Again, I won't get into details, on some of these macro pointers. Obviously, some of the tailwinds which India has today and why the economy is doing so well is, of course, in Make in India theme, we are doing exceptionally well. And I'll come to some of the details of it. Services has been, the bellwether of the country, and it has been doing exceedingly well. Again, formalization of the economy is something which has been happening and has been accelerating post the GST. Banking system is now very robust, with banks very well capitalized and NPAs at historically low levels. Incrementally we expect capex recovery to happen even in the private sector. So the government has been lifting a lot of capex story, but incrementally we expect even private sector to kind of join the party. And clearly, like other speakers also pointed out, India is the shining light in the world. No other large economy at this point of time is growing at the rate at which India is growing. So I think clearly some of the important and some of the tailwinds which are favoring the economy today. However, at the same time, I think it is very, very important to understand the risk, and clearly, the slowing global economy and the slower growth of the global economy is a clear risk. You look at US, now the debate is around whether the US will have a soft landing or a hard landing. At the same time, the slowdown is imminent. Whether they go into a recession is something which is debatable, but I think from where the economy is, a slowdown is imminent. China is slowing down. So, the larger economies are slowing down, and that is a risk for the global growth, for the exports, overall economy which we have. And similarly, if you look at some of the, other headwinds also, if you look at the valuations, that is clearly a headwind at this point of time. And geopolitical uncertainties, clearly 2 wars, 2 large, regions under conflict is a clear risk which we see, the last one is that the inflation is behaving very, very kind of mischievously, and the interest rate can be higher for longer, and that theme can actually spoil the equity party going forward. So tailwinds, as I highlighted, I won't get into some of these details, as the focus is on the consumption theme. So some of these slides I'll try to skip given the paucity of time. So this is the banking sector slide which I talked about. I think banks are very well poised. Infrastructure push, we all are very well aware of this story. Government has been spending particularly very, kind of the focus has been very, very strong from the government side, and the private capex has to come in. I think that is something which we all are expecting. There in the last 2 years, there has been some kind of uplift in the private capex as well, and that gives us hope that the capex story can come back in a big way. Real estate cycle, has started in the last 2 years. Clearly, there is a traction in the overall real estate, and that is mainly because the affordability of the real estate in India has increased significantly in the last few years. I mean, this is the slide I was talking about. India clearly is the shining light of the world. And not only in terms of the GDP growth rate, but I think the more important point is the chart on the right hand side, where the debt to GDP ratio for India is below GFC levels, and or near about that level. Versus look at some of the other countries like China, it has gone through the roof. And that is one of the very, very important point, one of the very important risks which needs to be highlighted. I think the domestic inflow story we all are aware of and has been kind of very, very important part of this equity journey. What it does clearly is to reduce the volatility in the market, and it has clearly kind of helped reducing volatility despite significant outflows in some time period by the FIIs. Coming to some of the potential headwinds, again, won't get into details, but inflationary pressure, global inflation is clearly one of the key headwinds. Interest rates can remain higher for longer. I mean, that theme is something which we all are worried about, especially with the two wars going on, and the supply chain disruption which is happening because the world is kind of now diversifying away from China. I mean, obviously China was the manufacturing hub, but now, because of the political as well as, some of these wars going on, the supply chain disruption is something which is leading to significant inflation globally, and that is where we are worried on. Slow growth in the rest of some of the large developed countries like US and China is something which is a bit negative for the equities. And lastly, I think valuations, while we all are enjoying the party, I think one thing is very clear that valuations, especially in the mid caps and the small caps, are at historic high levels. Basically, if you look at the mid cap valuations, they are close to around 60% premium to their long-term trend, and small cap are close to around 50% premium to their longer-term valuation trends. So this was in basically in summary what I kind of spoke about, and the idea was to get through some of the macro a little faster, and I won't kind of repeat the same points, but this slide kind of gives you the summary of the tailwinds and the headwinds which we are seeing in the global equities as well as the Indian, from the Indian equities perspective. Now, this was a theme which I was basically talking about. We have a fund which is HDFC non-cyclical consumer fund. It is basically the consumption fund of HDFC. And the longer term, India is at such a kind of an inflection point, at such a juncture, that the consumption story has, if you look at the longer term picture, last 10 years, or if you fast forward to next 15 years or 20 years, I think consumption story is one structural story which has never kind of disappointed people. If you provided, of course, I mean, there have been few periods of disappointment in the short term, but the longer term story has been phenomenal. And we believe that even from a tactical point of view, the timing is very, very right for the consumption theme in India. And some of the pointers, some of the longer term fundamentals are what we are highlighting. The first point is that, our per capita, is income per capita is now has crossed $2,000. I mean, that was in 2021. Now we are closer to $2,500 mark. And in some of the larger countries like China, some of the other Asian countries, whenever the per capita income has gone above $2,000 mark, in the next 5 to 10 years, the consumption growth has kind of accelerated significantly. So that is something which we are expecting going forward in India as well. Second, some of these points are not new, probably, some of you out here would be knowing, but I think important to highlight that demographically, India is placed, again, this was the per capita related, chart where India is versus where China was. I think China was, in 2004-5 period, China was broadly around where India is today. And look at the kind of growth rate which happened, which followed, and the right hand side chart is again the chart which shows the growth rate in some of the consumption categories in China, during that period. And I think it is very, very pertinent chart. Those kind of growths can play out in India in the next 10 years or so. Demographic point which I was highlighting, I think most of the, the global demographic is now kind of aging. The global population in few years time, probably around 5 years down the line, will start kind of actually degrowing. In that context, I think India at broadly around 30 years of median age is something which is nothing but a boon in my view. China is at close to around 38, 39, US is also around similar level. I think demographically we are very well placed. Couple that with urbanization, I think one big theme which will obviously play out in the next 10 to 20 years, again, next couple of decades, is the urbanization theme, similar to what happened in China in the last 30 years. Now, this is probably the most powerful slide of, of the entire presentation, and the way in which, this slide talks about the income pyramids, and the way in which the income pyramid is inverting, in the next 10 years is very, very powerful in my view. I think I'll leave you with one number. Today, the number of people above 8 lakh rupees per capita income is close to around, this is basically in household. The number of household above $10,000 or close to around 8 lakh rupees is somewhere close to around 7.5 crore. That number is tripling in the next 7-8 years, and probably that is one of the main reason why premiumization will play a very, very big role, going forward. I think the entire income pyramid is kind of inverting in the next few years, and probably this is something which needs to be kind of kept into mind because the consumption pattern of the country is changing dramatically. Obviously, this is the premiumization story in a picture, in a nutshell, and I don't have to kind of tell you the details, but I think it is very well understood, 30 years back and today how, people have been kind of consuming some of the products. This is another part of the premiumization story. Now, formalization, if you look at, India has been, from many, many years, formalization has happened. I'm not saying the story, the theme is not new, but after GST, this actually theme has accelerated. Now, in every, kind of industry, there was a significant presence of unorganized, and that is now kind of converting to organized, and that is, in a way, even our industry, mutual fund industry, has also benefited, because once a person comes into the organized basket, he has no fear in kind of investing the money in the formalized channels. So I think why we saw a significant boost post GST was in the mutual fund industry. The investment came, kind of the growth rates in the mutual fund industry went up significantly post GST. Was one of the reason was this. More and more entrepreneurs, more and more people in the unorganized sector, they kind of came into the organized. And I think this is something which is very, very powerful. And lastly, I would, say, again, this is a longer term trend. I think the accessibility has improved meaningfully because of e-commerce, now incrementally quick commerce. The digitization has kind of increased the accessibility of the products meaningfully. Now even sitting in a tier 4 town or in a remote village, people can aspire for some of the best products which are manufactured in the country or even imported from outside. So while what I talked about in the last maybe few minutes is not new, and these trends have been continuing for some time, there has been some acceleration, but I think the agenda for today is why now. Why I'm talking about this presentation or why HDFC kind of selected this theme for this meet is in the next few slides. I think things are changing. Last 2-3 years have been not very good for overall consumption, especially the rural consumption. One of the main reasons for the rural consumption not doing well was very high inflation, especially the food inflation was very high. Also, COVID took away a lot of unorganized jobs, and COVID was one of the reasons why the mass consumption kind of decelerated. This slide talks about the summary of some of the reasons why we believe the timing is right for consumption to pick up in the country. One, we believe that the inflation trends from what we saw earlier, basically in the last 2 years, have been moderating. While it has not kind of subsided completely, but the inflation trends have clearly moderated. I think that is very important from a consumption point of view. And I have a slide for that. If you look at this slide, this talks about the right-hand side chart. The inflation in 2022 calendar year and now, the trend is coming down. I mean, while I agree with the point that it's still we have issues, especially in the food inflation side, but the trend is improving. That is very, very good for consumption overall. Second is that incrementally, if you look at the GDP data and the private final consumption data which came out, I'm talking about the chart here. First quarter data after a very disappointing FY24, the first quarter data showed an uptick. So that tells you that there is a bit of a revival in the consumption overall. Also, if you look at the big factor which is happening, and that is happening post this 2024 central elections, is the state governments have incrementally kind of now starting new welfare schemes. Some of the large states like Maharashtra, Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh, etc. in the last 1 year, they have announced close to around, now this is a chart which I'm trying to show you. In the last 1 year, all of these state governments put together, they have announced 3 lakh crore rupees of welfare schemes. And some of them is listed. I don't want to kind of get into details of each of the scheme, but if you look at Maharashtra, they have announced 1,500 rupees per month for women below certain income category. And similar, Madhya Pradesh, if you look at Karnataka, Telangana, these are not small numbers. Basically, the important point which I am trying to highlight is that welfare spending in India has a direct correlation with overall consumption. So if you look at this long-term chart, the last 22 years chart, whenever the government has stepped up the welfare spending, the consumption has improved in India. The right-hand side is basically the consumption, the overall consumption related, government consumption related spending, and the left hand side is basically the consumption growth in the country. It is broadly correlated. You look at the period between 2008 to 2013-14 thereabouts. The growth in India in consumption was very, very strong, driven by the fiscal transfers, the government welfare spending programs, etc., etc. So I think that point is incrementally very important from a timing perspective. Again, if you look at some of the near-term themes are, of course, this time around the monsoons have been good. Expectation is of a good harvest, etc. Only time will tell, but I think at least the indication, at least the data points till now has been pretty good. And lastly is, the rural part. Lot has been talked about rural consumption, but I think a lot of companies are now incrementally coming and telling that, rural consumption is improving from where it was, let's say, 1 year back. So while it has not come in exact data, but over the next 1 year, we expect that, the rural consumption, the mass consumption can improve dramatically, if you kind of put across all of these pointers in place. This is something which I talked about, again, monsoon and inflation slowing. I talked about the correlation part. I talked about important to highlight again that, US versus India, we all kind of compare. This is a very, kind of interesting chart. US in terms of the consumption trends, they recovered and to the pre-pandemic level. And one of the important reasons for the same was their stimulus package, which was announced during the COVID, where they kind of gave a relief package, some kind of a relief package to people there, and that helped them to recover. I think that phase in India is coming now. India at the same time has not recovered. If you look at the right hand side chart, that is the India consumption. The trends are still below pre-pandemic levels. So welfare schemes, again, just to kind of repeat that point, becomes incrementally very, very important, and that has been shown in US. This one I talked about. These are some of the rural consumption related charts. This is K-shape, and recovery. We all have been talking about K-shape recovery, and this is this is actually the reason I won't kind of get into details because of the paucity of time. And yeah, I mean, this is broadly the details of the sector which are included in the fund. It's a typical consumption fund, but we name it as non-cyclical consumption fund because we have removed some of the cyclical sectors out of the fund. So basically the sectors which are not part of the fund are autos, power, basically real estate. Some of these sectors which we thought are cyclical, we have removed that, and that is why the theme is non-cyclical consumer fund. This is the valuations. Valuations are broadly in line with the 5-year average. Fundamentals of the company, in the sector is very strong. I think these are some of the kind of details. I won't get into details. Anyways, you'll get it on the website. Fund has done well since inception. There is a significant alpha which has been generated in the fund. Some of the risk factor again. Lastly, to sum it up, if you look at the longer term trends are intact. The premiumization story, the demography, the per capita related inflection point which we have seen just now, the formalization of the economy and the digitization of the economy which is improving access. These are all very, very fundamental points which are kind of enabling consumption and it will remain a very kind of an important part of the economy. Basically the timing of it is something which is very important. And I kind of stressed on why this fund or why the theme is important. More importantly, the theme is important today. And lastly, I would say that, again, this is a sector which, while risk is there in every equity, but this is a sector which deals in some of the very, very quality names. The quality in terms of the balance sheet, the quality in terms of the cash flows, return ratios, etc. is very strong. So that's it. Thank you very much. I'll end my presentation.
Thank you so much, Amit Sinha sir. Can we have Mr. Sandeep S., Regional Head Kerala of HDFC Asset Management Company, to join Amit ji on stage? Also calling Mr. Mahesh Nair, Mr. Pramod, and Mr. Vishak RS. The lucky draw from HDFC Mutual Fund. Can we have the boxes, please? Amit ji, you can pick up 3. Number 493, first call. 493, second call. 493, that stands cancelled. 311, 311, 311. Number 466, 466, 363, 363, yeah, 363, please come running. The gift being won by Mr. Rajesh. Sir. 147, 147, yeah, please come running. Number 488. Yeah, 488. The winner is Miss Sri Lakshmi from Chennai. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Can we have Mr. Ullas Divakar to kindly come forward to hand over a gift from the side of AIFA to Mr. Amit Sinha?